Hey everyone, and welcome to Backseat Sports. I'm Josh, that's Caleb, and guys, what a day in Husker football, college football news around the country. It's absolutely nuts. So real quick, we recorded a video about the original news about the Big Ten canceling their season, the potential that Nebraska could make happen, basically. And then we saw the bomb that happened tonight. The commissioner of the Big Ten basically said Nebraska will get kicked out of the Big Ten if they try to play a season this fall. The big questions that come to mind with this is, could Nebraska actually leave the Big Ten? Absolutely insane.
Yeah, Josh and I recorded earlier in the day, and then the media turned around and just shot us. And Scott Frost and just the whole Nebraska program for the rest of the day. All those articles came out around like 10:45, and Josh and I were like, crap, gotta record again. So yeah, here we are. Man, I did not expect to be shot in the back in such a way that we did.
So quickly.
Yeah, I mean, and the crazy thing is, literally the ACC, the whole ACC and the whole SEC said they're going to play.
They doubled down.
But Nebraska is the one who's absolutely getting caught in the crossfires.
So again, we recorded earlier about all the options that Nebraska had, which we're going to put that at the end of this video because it's still a really productive conversation. We'll definitely lead into it at the end of this conversation too. It's definitely going to be worth watching, so stick around for it. But the Big 12 also today decided that they're going to make this season happen as well. So the Big 12, SEC, and ACC are playing football this fall, at least at this point for sure. They've doubled down on it, and it seems like they're going to try to make it happen. I mean, Nebraska came out again yesterday and kind of said that we are going to search for options if the Big Ten tries to cancel the season or wants to cancel the season. Us in Iowa were down to play this season. Kevin Warren, the commissioner of the Big Ten, said today, he was asked specifically by Yahoo Sports if Nebraska could play football this fall without the Big Ten playing, and he said no, not do that and be a member of the Big Ten Conference. So he's basically saying that they'll be kicked out if they play football this fall. It's just absolutely nuts.
No, it's crazy, and I did not expect such just a visceral response from the rest of the country. Everybody loves football. They want to see it happen. Other sports, again, like Josh and I have said, well, this is college. They figured out a way. We've had months and months and months to figure out about this. Obviously, it's a lose-lose situation, but you can figure out a right way to do this. And Scott Frost was saying that he believes that there was options, and that, they want to do the best we could. They felt the players were the most safe. Again, Josh and I covered this earlier. I love Mike Wilbon. Like, just let me say, I'm an apologist of PTI. It's my favorite show on ESPN. But just the absolute ripping he went into Nebraska. Go ahead and leave was his quotes from that. Wilbon, you are a Northwestern alum. You said you're a season ticket holder. Congrats. You and 7 other people are season ticket holders. I love you, man. And you were saying Nebraska's
Northwestern's a home game for Nebraska.
You're sitting on your high horse from going to the Big Ten championship barely 2 years ago. Congrats. You've been to as many championships as we have, and we haven't been in this conference for 115 years or whatever you said it was, however long it's been here. So
I know.
Congrats,
but we don't want this to be a rant at the end of the day. They were told that teams are going to be allowed to have 20 hours of workouts and drills per week in the fall for football.
For what?
But like, okay, you're going to practice for the season. That's not going to happen. Supposedly the Big Ten's going to try to do a spring football season, which seems outrageously impossible.
Yeah, Josh and I, again,
we'll talk more about that at the end of the video. Yeah, we'll talk more about that at the end of the video. But one thing that Urban Meyer said later after we recorded was that he was in a talk. His quote was, if you have a chance, talking about players, that you can fulfill your commitment to university and then go and earn a living playing football, I don't know if I'd advise a guy to play a spring season before going to the NFL draft. So Urban Meyer believes that most guys who think they have a chance to get drafted would opt out of the season in the spring. And at that point,
he would tell him to.
And Urban Meyer would probably tell him to. So you would have a season probably without Justin Fields, without so many dominant players inside the Big Ten, inside the Pac-12, and depending on what ends up happening with the other conferences. Why does that make sense for a conference to do? And if 3 of the 5 Power 5 conferences are going to try to make a go at it, why doesn't the Big Ten try to follow suit? The Big 12 announced that they're going to up the ante with how they're going to do scans for players, weekly scans and protocol to increase safety for the players. And we're going to talk more about this later in our second half of the video here. But Frost his statement was that, players are safer at Nebraska than they are at their homes. They have way better free medical care at Nebraska facilities versus going home and having to pay for it. Like, there's just so many advantages for players to be safer playing football than to be at their own homes or be inside classes. Like, what?
And this is the Big Ten. Like, at Nebraska, players have their own separated food cafeteria with the training table. It's separate. Not any student can get there. Only student athletes can eat there. We have our own private travel to go to all of the games. They don't have to intermingle on planes, bus. Like, we have our own facilities for that.
And then the players could just take online classes.
I mean, at this point, it's looking like all of the high schools in Nebraska, most of the high schools in Nebraska said it's going completely remote anyway. So I wouldn't believe that colleges wouldn't follow suit anyway on that. So, athletes could literally be the only players on campus. Like, could be the only people on campus even.
And, like, maybe that's what the Big Ten's trying to fight, is, like, the amateur status debate of like college athletes. I feel like everybody understands the unique circumstances of the year. It only makes sense in that way. And, like, the big questions that come to mind with this is, could Nebraska actually leave the Big Ten? And what would it take for them to join the Big 12? What would that look like? And then we're going to talk about what the schedule could potentially look like at the second half of the video. And then what would transfers look like if the season's actually canceled? Could you see Justin Fields go to Ole Miss and play the whole season there? Like,
because if the SEC actually does play, right, and Auburn needs a quarterback and Justin Fields can go slide over to Gus Malzahn and he can play, because the Big Ten isn't going to play football this year. And, like, if it's a split season, there's no way to do a national championship if the Big Ten's going to play in the spring and the SEC, ACC, and Big 12 are going to play in the fall.
So you're just playing for a
There's
champion.
no bowl,
Like, what? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's well thought out at all in the big picture.
And, like, we'd already split it so that there's only 10 teams to handle. Like, could Kevin Warren really not be able to handle 10 teams? To be able to regulate them to not get COVID,
to figure out how to put rules in place to make sure that the players are healthy. Isn't that part of the commissioner's job?
Yeah, you would think. And I think it was.
But maybe he wants to get hired as the NFL commissioner in 10
you
years,
think there's ulterior motives here to taking the high ground for NFL commish? He is next in line. It does smell a little. I smell some personal motivation in there. And just like,
I don't know.
Calling out Nebraska not having the balls to move when we literally switched from the Big 12 because we didn't like the contracts and moved over to the Big 10, even though we'd been there for years. Like, really? Like, that seems silly too. And I mean, not wanting us, like, come on. And the $50 million, like, are we even is any team gonna get that? Because we're not playing football, so how the TV contract's gonna work? And in the spring, baseball, March Madness, NBA's back. There's a lot of
competition in the spring. Yeah,
there's just a lot more TV space filled up by other things.
So, in your opinion, like, what would it actually take for Nebraska to leave the Big Ten and join? I mean, presumably it would be the Big 12. We came from the Big 12. Where would we want to go back? I mean, there's no other conference really makes sense. The Pac-12, the ACC,
you need
SEC,
another team. Can you get that finalized in a month? That's my big question.
Right. The biggest question is, like,
is there a timetable where that's even possible?
Yeah, there's only 10 Big 12 teams right now. I'm sure they'd like to get back to being the Big 12 eventually with 12 teams. And Nebraska only makes sense to be in there, but, like, who would be the 12th team that you would add? Could they figure out a way to do just 11 this year? I don't know.
I mean, the ACC did with adding in Notre Dame.
So maybe that's what you try to do. I mean, the big contention points for Nebraska have in the past have been, like, the TV rights, the Longhorn Network, like the location of the Big 12 championship game, like whether it was going to be in, like, Dallas or Kansas City. And then, like, having Oklahoma on the schedule every year was kind of a big thing that we wanted to make sure we had. Those would probably be some of the biggest talking points for the Big 10 and Big 12. We are on the younger side of Husker fans, obviously. But I've personally really enjoyed our time in the Big 10, and I think our play style fits the Big 10 better than the Big 12 overall, especially before Scott Frost. We'll see what happens with how our offense evolves over the coming years. But Nebraska feels like a Big 10 team now, and I know we haven't been received as well in the conference because we haven't been as good as we hope to be.
Yeah.
But I would be sad if we left the Big 10. I don't put the odds at high that we end up actually biting the bullet to make it happen. I don't know. Caleb, where are you at with it?
Yeah, again, I just don't see it either. I mean, I've liked the Big Ten. Obviously, we've been a power football that's kind of been our way anyway, and it feels like a lot more like a Big Ten type of a play style. And I don't think it's just adaptation, but that's kind of how it was even in the Big 12 for us. We loved running with a single back system and pounding that football. We had a lot of coaching switches, and we tried to do a lot of different things and kind of got away from who we were. I miss some of those rivalries. Obviously, Oklahoma's really fun
for sure.
I mean, I don't really like playing Colorado. Not to bag on them or anything, but they're just they're fans.
Yeah.
But,
for sure.
But in Missouri and Texas A&M was a blast, but they're not in the Big 12 anymore. So
it's definitely not the same as it was, considering that Missouri and Colorado were two of the rivals that we had, and now they're not there anymore. And you go back to the Big 12, it feels a lot different. It feels weird. I don't know if it makes the most sense for Nebraska, and this is really, really tough situation for Nebraska to be in, and it definitely increases the odds that we just end up not playing football this fall, which is extremely depressing and demoralizing. But that begs the question is, what will transfers look like this fall? Because if there's a world where guys can transfer, I mean, we're literally not playing a season this fall. If a guy feels like, I need to play this fall to go to the NFL next year to actually make money, and this year was my year that I felt like I can break out, I can be a great player, I can get drafted in the top 4, even 5 rounds and be on a roster next year for sure in the NFL. All it takes is me to transfer to Ole Miss, to Mississippi State,
Wan'Dale Robinson was already on the fence about us at Kentucky,
Yeah, exactly. So it makes me worried that every team in the Big Ten could in theory lose quite a few starters to teams in the ACC, the Big 12, and the SEC if they're playing a full season this year.
And just what a weird thing that would be if teams do play football, the Big 12, and the SEC and the ACC play a full season this year. The Big Ten is just sitting here with their hands in their pockets.
It would be mind-blowing. It would be mind-blowing. I mean, maybe that's what happens. Maybe the NCAA is the key to what Nebraska ends up doing. What if the NCAA allows the instant transfer of players?
Yeah.
And now Nebraska's like, we're gonna lose our whole starting roster if we don't play this fall. And the player's like, Coach, if we're not playing this fall, it's nothing on you. I want to go play for Tennessee. And
I couldn't blame any of those players.
I couldn't blame them. No.
I think that would probably force Nebraska's hand. How
happy does JD Spielman feel right now?
Yeah, that he transferred out. Yeah. Like $1 million, dude. He's like, that's awesome. I'm gonna play. I mean, maybe he knew something we didn't know, but
honestly, maybe. Yeah, that will be interesting to see. If the NCAA allows the instant transfer of players without losing eligibility this fall, that could be the domino that pushes Nebraska over the edge to say, all right, it's worth it. We need to leave. I mean, the Big Ten, we have no other option. We're going to lose our whole starting roster.
My final question
that's the biggest question.
Can we leave the Big Ten temporarily? Can we take the money cut for a year just to play football and then come back? Would we be allowed
the
back?
wink that will come back eventually?
Mm-hmm. I think that's the second, that's my second biggest question is, will we be able to come back to the Big Ten?
Because it was a pretty firm answer from Kevin Warren, though. I don't know, man. What do you think? It doesn't feel like we're getting any warm, nice vibes from the commissioner here.
Yeah, well, it's his first big thing. So
it's his first year on the job. Yeah,
he's got to look good. Yeah, he's got to look good. Set a precedent with us or whatnot. Definitely doesn't set us up on the right foot. I mean, I couldn't have named the Big Ten commissioner beforehand.
Yeah, now I definitely can.
But now I can, and that's not a good thing. So
no,
he's made a few hundred
bad
thousand
impression
fans.
on Nebraska fans. Yeah. So I guess that's the biggest thing. The next part of our conversation that we're gonna hear transition to then is what Nebraska would do to play football this fall. Would it for sure be joining the Big 12? Or are there other options? Do we just
go independent like Notre Dame for a year?
Right. Can we just not join any conference for a year and just play football? And then the Big Ten lets us back in next year, or what that looks like,
I would assume we'd be able to float ourselves independently. I mean, at least for a while.
Right. That would be the biggest question. So that's what we talk about here in our second half of the conversation. I think there is a world where we could potentially just say, all right, we're just going to schedule Sunbelt teams, schedule Conference USA, just those small school teams, and then see what the Big Ten does. That's where we're going to go from here. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation about the potential of where we could go with the schedule this year.
What a roller coaster.
It's definitely a roller coaster.
And it feels like we haven't even dropped off the cliff yet.
Exactly. So enjoy that. Let's get into that conversation.
Man, it has been an emotional roller coaster the Big Ten has taken us through. We have Scott Frost pleading, making his case yesterday in a press conference.
Yeah.
I think earned a lot of brownie points with most of the fans.
Add those years on the contract. Let's go. Lock them in.
Yeah, exactly. Saying, we want to play football. Let's not waste our time here.
Yeah. Players are safest with us on campus with all the medical experience. And I think overall the whole interview was really, really good. I highly recommend go checking that out. I mean, basically, he just talked about how players are safest on campus with the medical care of the facilities and the diet and the workout plan and the routine and the weekly checks that they were going to have. Players are safe playing college football this year. College football is not the problem for why players would end up getting sick this year. And they're just as likely, if not more likely, to get sick without playing college football this year. So it was a great press conference from Scott Frost. And today we're going to be talking about potential options that Nebraska has moving forward over the next few days and into the next few weeks, scheduling a potential season, or the hopes that we can try to play like what Scott Frost, Bill Moose, and the rest of Nebraska has kind of been preaching, that we're looking to play and exploring options. So the Pac-12, the Big Ten, the MAC, and the Mountain West have officially canceled their seasons, and there's a handful of schools that are still planning on making it happen. So going through the options, we basically had about 7 options that could potentially be the outcome of what ends up happening the next few weeks for Nebraska football and how that plays out. And for other schools that are kind of in the same boat, that Iowa's in right now as well, that has like officially stated they want to play from the top down at the university they want to play. The biggest hurdle off the rip for all the teams and for anyone that's trying to play this year and the weird situations, whether or not we're playing or not, is the eligibility of players and how that's going to be sorted with this season and heading into the next season. Because there's a lot of options for how it could go down.
For baseball last year and the spring sports, in March 30th, the NCAA said, they would allow schools to decide, and if they would want to, that they could extend eligibility. But how in the world is that going to happen with football? The biggest
many scholarship
sport
players
in all of college sports.
It's crazy.
By a long shot. You're going to have, over 100 people on scholarship?
Basically, on a lot of teams, yeah.
That'd be 125
That's
scholarships,
insane.
5 years. That would be crazy. That's so much money. A lot of schools obviously could not do that. And that also gives an unfair advantage to schools like us, Nebraska, right, and big Ohio State schools, where, Bowling Green's not going to be able to have the 125 scholarship athletes.
No chance.
No way.
And that's coming off of a season where either you're not playing or taking a massive loss in some way. So it's like, how are teams possibly going to afford that?
And that was one of the big things Scott Frost brought up in that press conference, is the devastating effects that this could have on NCAA sports as we know it if we do not play the season. Yeah. And that's also, again, why I really felt that we were going to figure out how to play college sports, because they need the money. Like, we lost March Madness, the bills and the lights.
A big blow to a lot of schools.
For a lot of schools on how to keep the lights on in the gym. And, for big schools and most of the Big Ten, we're probably fine. But, like, the MAC schools that canceled, like, they need that money. The Mountain West needs that money.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. I mean, the MAC canceling was basically a fallout of the Big Ten canceling for the most part, because so many of those teams rely on the non-conference paydays for, like, the basic beatdowns that a lot of these teams get at the beginning of the year. When Ohio State and Wisconsin are dropping 70-plus points on your head, you're getting paid big to play those games, and that funds the schools and their whole athletic departments for the whole year. And without those games, they didn't see the value in playing the season. So moving forward, I mean, again, there was a mandate by August 14th for teams to decide how players were going to be able to be dealt with the opting out and the eligibility of players opting out. So that was kind of a deadline that was set by the NCAA for teams being able to negotiate that. So it's weird. We're going to have to wait on more information for how that's going to necessarily work out for, like, Big Ten players who aren't playing this year and how that's going to play, and if they're going to be ruled on the same as, the baseball players in the spring or other sports from the spring sports. That is still to be decided. That's a big factor for teams when trying to decide how this is going to play out with the 7 options that we have here. So let's quickly read through the 7 options that we have, and we'll talk about which ones are the most likely, which ones, are more dreams than anything else, and how this could potentially play out. 7 options here. The Big Ten moves the season to the spring. That's one. Number two, you play a small conference schedule and then maybe a few non-cons. So, maybe 4 or 5 conference games and then 2 or 3 non-cons, or maybe even just 5 conference games. Then there's a world where we just play 1, 2, 3 exhibition matches this fall, and that's it. And then maybe you're looking to the spring, potentially. Maybe we join the Big 12 for a full season. Maybe Nebraska plays like a full independently scheduled game against Division I schools. That could potentially be an option. Or we play a full independent season against smaller schools in smaller conferences like the American, Conference USA, or Sun Belt. So, and the last option is there's no football at all. So, not an ideal option. We don't want number 7.
Yeah, anything but number 7, please.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, Caleb, when you're looking at this, which one do you feel like is the most likely right now?
Well, I think the biggest thing that Josh and I, the first concern that we had when talking about this is, how are we locked into the Big Ten?
Yeah, what are the contracts?
Yeah, exactly. What's the fine print say for this scenario? Because if we want to secede from the Big Ten, how is that going to work?
Civil War time. Let's go.
Yeah. How is this going to work? How are we going to figure this out? In this case, how are we going to become independent if only for a season? How does this affect it? And the biggest thing that locks us in is the TV contracts to the Big Ten.
CBS Sports put out an article about Nebraska and the TV rights that could hold us in place. And they said high up TV executives said that the contracts are going to be the X factor for Nebraska from potentially preventing them from being a free agent for the 2020 season as a whole. There might be some potential loopholes around it and renegotiating certain deals for 1 year, especially if TV contracts or the TV stations are hoping to have some good football to put on their channels this fall. And if they want that, maybe they're going to be willing to renegotiate some things and restructure some things to make some loopholes possible for this year.
Yeah, so let's talk about the Big 12, because obviously that's the most exciting. And that really reminds me of, if we're in the Big 10, but we want to play in the Big 12 for a season, it reminds me of a boxing match, but it's 2 different promoting companies. And it's really hard to negotiate those details of, well, who's the headliner here in this matchup?
Yeah,
who
which
gets
station
the pay
goes
cut
on
of
what?
Yeah, exactly. How much pay cut is somebody going to get?
That's a lot of negotiation.
And that's a lot of work. And it usually takes sometimes, years to lock down one of those marquee fights. And I see that being the same way. While it'd be really, really exciting to play in the Big 12 for a season, especially if they continue on.
Yeah.
And a lot of us would want that just to see some of the old rivalries. Again, it's just really hard to see that being negotiated, and I think that would be a pretty unlikely scenario.
So I would say joining the Big 12 is definitely on the unlikely side of the 7 outcomes.
Yeah, if we could get a mini Big 10 schedule where just a few teams want to play, and maybe, it's like basketball where you play them twice, one at home, one away.
That would be really weird. That would be so weird.
It'd be like the NFL where you play, inside your division twice.
Yeah, inside your division twice. It'd just be so weird for college football. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It'd be a really cool, interesting thing. Again, any way we could get them on the field. The one thing that I see being pretty likely, saying the Big 10 that most of the teams don't want to play, is, again, if the TV contracts, if we are the bigger name always and we're picking like smaller schools that are Division I to play and paying them money so they can fund their program, and the Big 10 also puts that on their television, I think a mostly independent season where we play, those smaller schools, the smaller Division I schools like South Dakota State.
A pretty possible option as well.
That's what I feel would definitely be most likely.
One option is where we play only independent, smaller school, or not independent, or independent and or small conference schools, where we're obviously the A side, and obviously we're playing on our TV contracts. We're playing with us getting the majority of the revenue, things like that. Like the American Conference, Conference USA, and the Sun Belt kind of come off as the conferences that seem to be playing football this fall, and it pretty much seem dedicated to play football this fall, where we could try to schedule them as like non-conference games and play our whole schedule just against those types of schools, and maybe have an Iowa matchup in there at some point.
Yeah, exactly. And throw in the sprinkle in the couple Big 10 teams that maybe play. I feel that is a very likely scenario, and maybe we do throw in a couple of maybe a local game as our first game of the season,
like a Shattern State or something.
Yeah, Shattern State, Wesleyan.
Oh no.
that's just super easy because it's under the same school systems. You don't have to figure out some contract pay for Wesleyan or, Shadron State. If that's
100%.
If that's under the same umbrella, that could really work out.
Yep. So I think like the two other options to kind of consider is what you were talking about, kind of the playing maybe 2 or 3 just exhibition games or reschedule. South Dakota State, we already had them on the schedule anyway, and then maybe 1 or 2 more, just kind of play them to play them. And that doesn't seem like a great option. I wouldn't be very excited about that, but at least we have some sort of football in the fall and instead of nothing. I don't know, where you at with that one? Like,
I feel like that's like the last case scenario,
like the last resort.
Yeah, that's the last resort before we get to the no football zone. That would also make at least some money. We could recoup some things.
Yeah.
If we could get on television in some way for that in some capacity, or it's a pay-per-view deal where we can watch it on a certain channel.
True.
For all those kids with scholarships, say the NCAA says, hey, you're not getting a second go at this. For all those seniors that worked super hard over the summer, even in the weird capacity that it was, at least they can see the field a couple more times in the Husker uniform.
For sure. And those are the types of games that you could probably schedule pretty quickly and do at the beginning of the year, be done with the season by like October, the end of October, kind of minimize the risk in that way, I guess. That
everybody
seems like
can be
a
home
fairly
by Thanksgiving. Yeah, I mean, or we watch on TV every single week the red versus white, and you switch up teams every week. There's drafts.
I mean, maybe you do something fun like that. I guess that we hadn't even considered that as a potential option, but maybe you do something like that.
Every single week you have a different captain, and the different captain
and they just draft
teams.
their teams.
Yeah, and you do draft teams, and
I mean, that's kind of fun. It's like some backyard football style games, and you just broadcast them locally.
At least it'd be fun. At least we get some football. And, honestly, it'd be pretty fun because Adrian Martinez versus Luke McCaffrey, getting to see that every single week would be pretty fun.
That would be fun. And, very competitive and, probably would help people grow and get better at football. Worst case scenario, you could do something like that. That'd be kind of fun.
Again, we just really want football. And I know, obviously, I'm really happy to hear that, we're trying to make it happen as the school of Nebraska. That makes me really happy to see that they're fighting for it. They're fighting for the kids that work so hard this season and the coaches, and they really just want to play and do it in the safest way possible. I'm sad that we couldn't bubble in some sort of way. The pros set up a system that has worked really well. I think Hawkeyes, it just came out on a tweet today, Hawkeyes done 1,584 COVID tests. All were negative because they bubbled. The pros postponed it just so that they could figure out a safe way to operate. I get that, the kids aren't paid or whatnot, but there's still a lot of their future rides on this.
They're building their careers. It's an investment for their futures.
Last year, Joe Burrow probably doesn't get drafted to the NFL before the LSU season. He goes from undrafted to the first draft pick. We're taking away lots of kids' chances to go from that. You know.
So I mean, in that same light,
how does that even work?
Let's talk about the last 2 options. The last two final options is that we kind of mentioned are no football or spring football. And spring football, it's been thrown around quite a bit, but it feels so impossible.
Already weird. How do you do that? Because there'd be so many sports. You got baseball, NBA basketball, and then now college football and college basketball.
All
the TV contract. We're talking about, we're all going at once. We're talking about TV contracts. That is a scheduling nightmare, and I think pretty much virtually impossible at this point.
And if it happens, then there's so many questions. What happens with the NFL schedule? If the NFL is playing this fall, they're gonna want to play next fall. So you're gonna have a spring season and then have all of those drafted players go play an NFL season 3 months later?
Yeah.
What? No way. That's not going to happen. And if it does, that's a massive safety risk for all of those rookies. And you'd imagine a lot of any draftable player or any player that would get invited to the combine would skip out on the season in the spring to then go prepare for the combine, prepare for the draft, and not risk their injury for their first NFL season.
It really shortens the timeline for them.
So would you play without basically a whole senior class of anybody who's draftable? They just all skip out. So you're playing a very asterisk season anyway in the spring without any of the senior players, without the Trevor Lawrences, without the Justin Fields of the world. They're all gone, and you're going to play a season like that with them not there now?
think Trevor Lawrence, because of his tweets, I think he's going to play. I think probably Justin Fields will play. But for, a lot of those guys that are in some pretty high-risk areas that's not quarterback, like running backs and stuff that are pretty high on those draft boards.
They would not play that season in the spring. There's no way.
I mean, you're risking a lot, not your body-wise. And again, if you're going into the NFL, it's just such a different thing for those older guys. I couldn't blame them.
So you're losing out on the top 32, top 64 best college football players probably in that season to then play in the spring, when then you have to now the NFL has to rearrange the combine, the NFL draft to accommodate for college football, rookie camps. I mean, I know we did that this year with changing around some things, but that seems like a massive scheduling nightmare for spring football to happen. Are you still planning on playing a fall college football season? Because if you are, that is an incredibly short off season to expect from players. And so
I think that's the even bigger concern
out?
Is the turnaround there, because you're going to go straight from season back into summer camp to fall camp right to another season.
6 weeks off, maybe.
You're giving them almost virtually no rest.
At the most 2 months. Yeah, I don't know. That's incredibly difficult. It seems way less likely than trying to play this fall. The biggest thing that prevents Nebraska from playing this fall is if the Big Ten basically threatens them in some way. If you play, something's happening.
You.
Yeah, we're gonna sue. We're gonna figure out a way. That's a breach of contract, something like that. That'd probably be the biggest potential hurdles to get over. Eligibility, if the NCAA says, well, if you play any game this fall, your whole team loses a year of eligibility. Otherwise, you could grant them the eligibility year if you don't play. And so that could be a hurdle if the NCAA is trying to kind of blackmail you into not playing.
That'd be really interesting, and maybe the conferences being split will force the NCAA to turn its hand and say, but again, this could bring about another whole domino change of amateurism to non-amateurism, and could we see the end of the NCAA if the SEC and the ACC say, hey, we're going to play anyway? And now Nebraska's caught in this limbo of, the NCAA says you can't play, but multiple conferences are going to be like, well, we're leaving the NCAA, and then that leaves Nebraska in a really tough limbo if the Big Ten wants to stay in.
Right. Or what if there was, one thought that came to mind, this is probably a whole nother video, I'll just mention real quick, but a situation where players are like, yo, what if we just create our own league and then just play? In a world where you create an independent amateur college football league, or somebody offers to, if you stop playing college football this year, you can come and play in this amateur league that'll pay you X amount of money.
Did The Rock just buy the XFL?
The Rock buys the XFL and says, hey, college players, opt out of this season, come play in the XFL, we'll pay you. Those are in theory options, that could potentially happen if there's a massive fallout in the coming few weeks. Unlikely, but definitely a potential option, I guess, in theory. So a lot to go over. I mean, we'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think the most likely potential option is. I think, Caleb, what do you, at the end of the day, what's your prediction for what's going to happen the next few weeks here with our schedule?
I think the NCAA is probably going to force the conference's hands in one way or another, either saying you can play or you can't. And I think Nebraska's a lot of schools are going to be faced with a really, really big decision. I don't know what's going to happen with the NCAA. It feels like it's in a really vulnerable spot right now, especially again with Frost's comments of catastrophic things can happen if we don't play. I think Nebraska's going to play football. I really believe that. I thought that, again, once the NBA played, I really figured that we would have college football this year. Once the NFL said we're going to play, we see hockey, we see soccer play. I really thought college was going to be fine. It's kind of threw me for a loop here that we were that the Big Ten is unwilling to figure it out in some way.
If you're putting your money on one of the options, where are you at with it right now? 100% guarantee. Here's your prediction. Predict.
We're going to play all small schools and maybe Iowa. That would be my prediction.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it too. I'll stay on the fence. It's either going to be all small schools, American Conference, Conference USA, Sun Belt plus Iowa, or we're going to play maybe 2 or 3 of those small schools and then play a small Big Ten schedule, Nebraska, Iowa, Ohio State, Minnesota, and 1, maybe 2 other teams at most. We play 4 or 5 games that we schedule on our own, and that's kind of what happens. I think the small school option is probably the most likely option.
Yeah, and if number 7 happens, I mean, Josh and I will keel over and just we'll just disappear into the wind.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if we can't run without football.
Yeah, you might see a missing persons report for us both, and football doesn't happen here. But again, we do appreciate you guys tuning in for the video. If you guys enjoyed it, drop a like, drop a comment, and subscribe. We do appreciate all the support, and it goes a long way in supporting us and doing our thing out here on Backseat Sports. But as always, I'm Josh, that's Caleb, this has been Backseat Sports, and we will see you next time. We are